This is my book critique number 4. So for the first book I chose, we'll be discussing Lily's Crossing. It was written by Patricia Riley Giff. The genre is realistic fiction, and the award received was the Newbery Medal. It was published in 1997 and is at a reading level from 5th grade through 9th grade. The concept of Lily's Crossing is that it takes place in the summer of 1944 with 10-year-old Lily, who normally lives in Queens, New York, but instead heads to Rockaway Beach to see with her Poppy and her Graham every summer. She always looks forward to summer fishing, swimming, and going to activities with her best friend Margaret. However, at this time period, World War II starts and is in progress, and the summer is not as hopeful as Lily would like. Her best friend Margaret's father gets a job helping with the war efforts and eventually has to move to Michigan, leaving Lily alone and feeling lonely. However, she meets a young boy named Albert who just moved to the area. Albert is a Hungarian refugee who just came to America but was separated from his family and his little sister Ruth, who they can't find currently, and she is sick with the measles. Albert comes to New York to stay safe from the Nazis and the war, yet struggles with feeling very alone. At first, Lily and Albert aren't very close or aren't friends, but eventually Lily and Albert end up saving a cat that was drowning in the ocean together, and that forms their friendship. Albert shares that he misses his sister and wished that someone could go to look for Ruth. At this time, Lily's father is unfortunately shipped off to fight in the war, and she's learning to deal with the reality that her father is in the war and all the events that take place during World War II. Eventually, her father, while fighting in the war, is able to find Albert's sister, Ruth, and is able to bring her back to America. The summer eventually ends, and Lily returns home, and Albert goes to Canada to be with his other family. When Lily's father returned home, he tells her that he was able to return Ruth to Albert and then that she was safe. Then we go by to another summer. It's another summer, and Lily is back at Rockaway Beach, and she's able to see Albert and Ruth together. They both are reunited as their friends and family, and Lily is overjoyed and very thankful. This book is set in a difficult time in U.S. history, but it helps young readers to understand that World War II was a very significant event and is able to provide historical context for young readers. For my lesson plan, I chose a social studies lesson plan for grade 6. I chose Ohio Learning Standards, Government Strand, Roles and Systems of Government, which is that governments can be categorized as monarchies, theocracies, dictatorships, or democracies, but categories may overlap and labels may not accurately represent how government functions. It also discusses citizens' liberties and responsibilities and varies according to the limits of governmental authority. So for this lesson, students will be able to learn about the major Axis powers of World War II that take place in Europe. So students will be focusing on the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan, as they were the biggest Axis powers. Using technology, students will do research regarding each of these 3 countries and the forms of government over there during the war. Students will then use a Padlet to report their findings, and then we'll create a Venn diagram using Canva to compare and contrast the Axis powers. Students will respond to one another, creating an online discussion. So here you can see in the first image that's labeled, you can see the label Italy. So I chose a Padlet that displays a map of Europe, which shows all the countries. And so each student will create a post discussing each country. So as you can see on the lower image, there's a picture of Germany, Italy, and Japan on the map with dots on them, or like points. Students will place their information regarding each Axis power correlating to the correct country, and then we'll respond to one another. And then I have a QR code right here. If you scan it, it'll take you to my Padlet. And then students will place the Venn diagram that I'll show you in just a second under one of the 3 countries, just because it allows it to be easier for the teacher. Moving on to the next picture, you can see here what the Venn diagram would look like. So it would be a Venn diagram Venn diagram of the three Axis powers, which are Germany, Italy, and Japan. And this map, students are supposed to create comparisons between these three, stating maybe they had similar forms of dictatorships, maybe they had similar war strategies, whatever it may be. And then students will also contrast by putting information specific to those countries to allow students to make comparisons. And students will use Canva to create their Venn diagrams, which will be posted to the Padlet. Moving on to my second lesson plan, I would use an English language arts lesson. So students will use Ohio Learning Standards Grade 6, Integration of Knowledge and Ideas. So they will compare and contrast one author's presentations of events with one another. Example, a memoir given by and a biography on the same person. So for this, students will be comparing and contrasting the experiences of Lily in the book to the experiences of Anne Frank. Anne Frank obviously existed in World War II. She was a Jewish child, and so she suffered from discrimination because of her being Jewish. And so students will read the biography of Anne Frank found on this website I have provided here, which is biography.com/activist/Anne Frank. Students will then write 2 pages worth of information regarding both Lily and Anne Frank, explaining how their situations were either similar or different, just comparing and contrasting again. Students use proper grammar and use textual evidence from the book, as well as the biography of Anne Frank, to make their comparisons. And this allows students to rely on history, but also to broaden their horizon by understanding Anne Frank, someone who lived through the war and was a very real person. The second book I chose for this book critique is Where the Wild Things Are. It was written and illustrated by Maurice Sendak. The genre is fantasy fiction. The award was a Caldecott Medal, and it was published in 1963. The reading level is pre-K through 3rd grade. So Where the Wild Things Are is focused on a young boy named Max. He is a mischievous boy and tends to get into trouble. Eventually, his mom calls him a wild thing and sends him to bed with no supper after he had gotten in trouble. Max then dresses in a wolf suit and is filled with rage and starts just jumping around his room in anger. Eventually, his room turns into a jungle and a boat appears. He sails to the land of the wild things, which is a place where big monsters live, but Max is not frightened by these big monsters. Instead, Max learns to tame the wild things, and the wild things agree that he is the wildest of them all, and they decide to make him their king. And he decrees, "Let the wild rumpus start." And he and the wild things dance, they get into shenanigans, hang from trees, scream, run around, and just act crazy. Eventually, Max realizes that he misses his mother and that these wild things are just too wild. And eventually he returns home where supper is waiting for him. This book is really great, especially for younger children, because it allows for teachers or for parents to teach students or their kids the purpose of timeouts, as well as how to handle anger management and to teach them how to handle their tempers. So it's a book that teaches loving discipline, but is great to demonstrate children's imaginations. That's all. Thank you.